Hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad you decided to join us today with the Books of the Month. And I'm sitting here with Miss Joy Nugent. Actually, she's joining us via Skype. Joy Nugent is not only an author, but she is a nurse and has worked as a midwife in Australia, Scotland, Toronto, Canada, and London, England. Matter of fact, she received her training in Australia and Scotland. Welcome, Ms. Nugent. Thank you for joining us today on Books of the Month.
Thank you very much for having me. It's exciting to be here.
It is an honor having you. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Joy. Is it okay if I refer to you as Joy?
Absolutely.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about you yourself. You have children, grandchildren?
Yes, I do. For 30 years, I was married to a quite well-known orthodontist, and we had 4 children, and I have 12 amazing grandchildren. But that's just half the story, because I feel as though I've had 2 lives. My first life was very much being an adventurer of the world and looking at nursing and doing my midwifery in Edinburgh. And for the last 30 years of my life, being a private palliative care nurse, sitting at the bedside of people who were dying. And that was the most profound experience of all time. I had the privilege to look after our very famous cricketer, Sir Donald Bradman, in the last 3 months of his life. But each case was very, very personal and very connected. We are connected in an energetic way with the people that we're with at the bedside. And it was because of this profound experience of exchanging energy that I realized that I had to look at myself and my attitude to death and dying before I could really help another person. And so it's been a journey of self-discovery, not only of my life, but my spiritual life of why am I here? I'm here for a reason, and I have no doubt that I am very close to Florence Nightingale, the founder of modern nursing, who is quite a mentor, who really was one of the most intelligent nurses, who really preferred to be thought of as a mystic in many ways. She really combined common sense, science, and healing. We had to create the right environment for healing to take place. And that very much is on a soul level. And I like to think of a soul as having a personality for a lifetime. And that personality being made up of a mental body, an emotional body, and a physical body. But we've got to work on each element to be a whole person. And so a lot of the work at the bedside was helping people with their unfinished business, helping them to die well. So I would say to people, how do you want to be remembered? And that is a profound question for somebody to think about. And it changed things. You know, the witness of the change that happened in those last days and weeks at the bedside with family and relationships was incredibly profound and healing. But it needed a coordinator, someone like myself, to be a neutral energy that pulled it all together. So I learned so much about life and help people to die without regrets. And as I would say rather jokingly, we have to get it right because there's no rehearsal. You know,
Exactly.
this is it.
So your experience as a nurse was your inspiration in authoring As Good Buys Get. And this is a very interesting piece of literature that you wrote. And the inside of this book, you are sharing your experience or different experiences that you had with different individuals. And exactly, as you stated, based on your writing, there are never ever 2 that are exactly the same when it comes to the whole concept of transitioning. Tell us a little bit more about your book, As Good as It Gets, a window into death and dying. Matter of fact, I love the artwork on the front.
Well, I have to tell you about the artwork on the front because they were my bank manager's parents. They were real people.
Okay.
And they had the privilege of, they were both dying of cancer, and they had the privilege of dying in their own bed in their own way. Now that is so much different than dying in a hospice or in a hospital or in a nursing home. You know, there is this fear, and relatives outsource the care at this important time when they don't need to. Part of writing the book was really to give people the confidence to die at home, which is what I encouraged people to do and facilitated, so that death is not a scary thing. You don't need the medical equipment and all the emergency things that you get in a hospital or a modern. It's a soul transition. You know, we're looking for that peace that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross told the world so much about dying with her stages. And one of the early things I did in my life was go to one of her life, death, and transition workshops. And I had to learn to care for the dying with unconditional love, as she recommended. Then I worked in a Catholic hospital when I first started in a hospice run by a nun called Mary Potter. And her aspiration to care.
Did you say Mary Potter?
Mary Potter, the nun. And Mary Potter's, this hospice, had the philosophy that you care for the dying with a mother's love. Now, that says it all, really, because there would be times when, people would be angry, rude, vomiting, smelly, aggressive, but like a mother and a child, that's the special time when they needed love and understanding. And it really brought home, being a mother at 4 children, that you love them no matter what. You know, you get up in the middle of the night for them. I was constantly on call. Because I was a private nurse running a private nurse practice, I had to have a 24-hour helpline for people. And I employed people, palliative care assistants, to be at the bedside. But it was a very personal journey. And that was just an amazing privilege. And I wished more people could have the example and the experience that I have had. You know, it very much was a privilege.
What is your, I didn't see where you dealt with this particular topic in your book, but what is your take on what happens once the soul, I heard you mention the transitioning of the soul. What happens after that transition, you believe, based on your belief?
Look, it's not a belief. I can tell you belief on experience, because I mentioned earlier about Sir Donald Bradman, the cricketer. It was quite extraordinary because when he was dying, the night he was dying.
The last 3 months of his life, correct?
Yes, but this is the last minute of his life.
Okay.
I am at home waiting for a phone call from a nurse. I thought he might die that night. And I lived alone. And suddenly I heard this loud snoring. Where did it come from? I got up and thought someone must have gone to sleep in the street. There's no one. And then the phone rang to tell me that he'd just died. But it was as though he was tapping me on the shoulder to say, I'm off. And I had that experience so many times. Another experience I had was with a very early patient called Charles. And he was a big builder. He built half of Adelaide. But he was dying of cancer, but he also smoked a particular brand of cigarettes. And a week after that he died, and it was all as he wished, I woke up early in the morning to smell a cigarette, and no one in my house smokes. And I thought, I must have imagined it, went back to sleep. Same thing next morning. And I realized it was Charles trying to contact me. So I put my legs over the side of the bed and say, what do you want to tell me? And in a thought process, it was look after his granddaughter and to be more businesslike. It's very hard for a nurse to be more businesslike, and I knew I needed to be. But the interesting thing was that next day, this granddaughter, who was a physiotherapy student, came into the office looking for a job, as a palliative care assistant.
Amazing. That
But
is,
I've had those experiences, many of them. So I know that there is an energetic spirit world and that it is just parting of the veil. You know, death is not the end, which is what I talk about in other books that I've written.
death is not the end. I was about to say that just before you stated that. Death is definitely not the end. This is a very, very interesting piece of work here that you have. It's going to answer a whole lot of questions that people may have when it comes to the whole concept of death. Just right quick, in like less than a minute, would you please share this with me? The animals came to pay homage. Would you tell me about that? That's chapter 16. This is very
Okay.
interesting. I want the viewers to hear about this. In less than a minute, can you share that with me?
Yes, I will. I went to see this man in a hospital. He again was in end-stage cancer and he wanted to go home, but he was still a little bit scared. And he would spend most of his energy in the hospital environment, you know, doing physio, having a physio, walking around the bed. And I said, look, you wake up, you've got so much energy. How do you really want to spend it? Do you want to spend it walking around the bed with a physio, or shall we go home? He said, let's go home. And we went home. And it was quite fascinating because we put the bed under a tree, well, where he could see the tree where the birds came into a feeder. And we're only home for an hour, and two of these beautiful dogs galloped up the road and into the room. We'd never seen them before. And then a kangaroo, of all things, bounded up the street. I lived in that area when I was married and had children. I never saw a kangaroo on the road. Here was a kangaroo.
That's
but also,
absolutely amazing.
well, it is amazing, but also then a koala came and sat in the tree. And it was just amazing. The day he died, there was a koala with a baby on her back in the tree. And I was told by his wife and family that that's what his life was, being connected to nature. And it was as though nature was coming to pay homage to him.
This is
we are connected.
This is extremely interesting. I'm sure that's going to be the favorite chapter of several people who purchases this book. Listen, we're almost out of time. Where can we find your book?
Amazon is the easiest place.
Okay. And do you have a website?
I do have a website, joynugentbook.com.
Joy Nugent.
Nugentbook.com.
Well, thank you, Miss Nugent, for joining us on Books of the Month. Again, this is a very, very, very interesting piece of literature. Even the artwork, it carries such a tremendous message that you have on the front cover. This is a depiction of something that you actually experienced. And you did write other books, correct?
I did write other books. I wrote one called My Way, which was my experiences and what I became. It was really a memoir. And then I wrote another one called Parting the Veil, which is where I summarize what I feel about euthanasia, spirituality, lots of the deep and meaningfuls. So it's a progression. The three books are really meant to be a trilogy, and one leads to the other.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure our viewing audience will appreciate the reading of your books. Thank you for joining us, Miss Nugent. You have been an awesome guest. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to read some more of this. And listen, those of you out there, I want you to stay with us. We have another guest coming right after this. Thank you, Miss Joy Nugent. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Thank you.